There is a kind of silence that isn't empty. A kind of stillness that echoes louder than shouting. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't chase, explain, or prove. It just exists. Steady, composed, untouchable. And in the eyes of those who expect a reaction, it is maddening. Welcome to the Everlasting Stoic, where we explore the power of restraint, the art of composure, and the timeless wisdom of mastering yourself. Today's journey is not about confrontation. It's not about revenge or loud declarations of self-worth. No, it's about a subtler force, a calm that cuts deeper, a quiet that dismantles pride. Because sometimes your absence is more profound than your presence. Your stillness, more disturbing than any word you could ever say. The kind of quiet that, when properly harnessed, shatters their ego like glass. If you find value in this kind of strength, quiet, steady, resolute, then I invite you to stay. Let this video be your companion in the pursuit of self-mastery. And if the message resonates with you, don't just watch, subscribe, like, and share this with someone else, walking the silent path. Now, take a breath. Sink into your seat. Let the noise of the world fade. And follow me into the silence that speaks volumes. Chapter 1. Silence as Strength. There's a silence that weak men fear. Not the silence of passivity, but of presence. The kind that walks into a room and shifts the energy without uttering a word. You've seen it before. In a man who refuses to argue when accused, who doesn't scramble to defend himself when misunderstood, who simply looks on, calm, while others lose themselves in noise. That kind of silence, it's not weakness, it's power. Most people think strength is loud, that it yells back when insulted, that it storms out when disrespected, that it must be heard to be felt. But the Stoics knew something deeper. They knew that the loudest man in the room is often the most uncertain, and that true strength is still, composed, and measured. It is the silence of a man who has nothing to prove. Silence is misunderstood in a world addicted to attention. We are told to speak up, to fight for our space, to assert ourselves constantly. But there's a paradox here. Those who know their worth don't need to scream it. They just are, and their silence becomes a mirror, reflecting the insecurities of others back at them. There is a strength in choosing not to react. Not because you are afraid. Not because you are afraid. Not because you are afraid. But because you are anchored in something deeper than the moment. When someone insults you, they are fishing for control. When someone tries to provoke you, they are trying to set the emotional terms. Your silence is the refusal to play their game. And in that refusal, they start to feel the weight of their own words. Have you ever been silent after someone expected an emotional reply? Have you watched their face twitch, waiting, confused by your calm? That is the power of withheld energy, of holding space instead of filling it. The ancients understood this. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reminded himself to return to stillness, not to suppress emotion, but to understand it, to rule over it, rather than be ruled by it. Because the man who can sit with his emotions and not flinch is feared in the best way, not because he is violent, not because he is cruel, but because his power cannot be touched. It is quiet. It is unshakable. This doesn't mean silence is always the answer. But when used deliberately, when chosen from a place of presence and strength, it sends a message louder than words. I do not bend to chaos. I do not fight battles that aren't mine. I remain while others unravel, and that unnerves people. Silence reveals. It shows who needs constant validation. It shows who depends on your reaction to feel significant. When you stop speaking, when you stop explaining, when you simply let things be, it becomes painfully obvious who was sustained by your attention. They begin to feel the hollowness of their own noise. So, begin here. Let your silence be intentional. Don't use it to punish. Use it to observe. Don't use it as a weapon. Use it as a weapon. Use it as a mirror. Let it say, I am rooted. I will not be moved. And let those who once held power over you begin to feel the emptiness left in your calm. If you've ever felt the strength of staying silent when everything in you wanted to speak, I invite you to share it in the comments. Your experience may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Chapter 2. Withdrawing attention. There is something uniquely unsettling to the ego about being ignored. Not out of cruelty, not out of neglect, but with deliberate calm. When you stop pouring your attention into someone who once fed on it, the absence is deafening. You are no longer applauding, no longer reacting, no longer giving their ego a mirror to admire itself in, and suddenly, they feel cold. This is the essence of power, not in controlling others, but in controlling where your energy goes. In choosing what you water, what you nourish, because attention is a currency, perhaps the most valuable one we possess. And the wise do not spend it recklessly. You see, when you stop explaining yourself to someone who doesn't listen, when you stop proving yourself to someone who has already made up their mind, you are reclaiming your dignity. You are no longer available for the games. And that quiet withdrawal, that subtle shift, it drives the prideful insane. They expect a reaction. They feed on it. Without it, they are left with their own echo. And for many, that echo is terrifying. People often mistake availability for value. If you're always there, always replying, always responding, your presence becomes expected, taken for granted. But when you step back, when you no longer chase, when you withdraw not in anger but in peace, suddenly your value becomes visible in absence. Think about a fire. It roars when you feed it, but leave it untended and the flames fade. The same is true for toxic dynamics. The more you feed them with attention, arguments, justifications, the more they grow. But when you step away, when you stop showing up to the battle, the fire sputters and the silence becomes a statement. This is not about ghosting. This is not about silent treatment or emotional punishment. This is about aligning your energy with what serves you and refusing to be baited into performances that drain your soul. You are allowed to walk away from conversations that go nowhere. You are allowed to pull back from people who confuse access with entitlement. You are allowed to let go without dramatics, without announcements. Just a quiet, graceful departure. The prideful hate this because it removes their control. They can no longer manipulate your emotions with guilt or drama. They can no longer provoke you into feeding their self-importance. Your silence forces them to sit with themselves, and in that silence, their own unresolved noise rises to the surface. Attention, when freely given, can create illusions. It can make others feel more powerful than they are. But when withdrawn, especially from a place of clarity, it breaks the spell. And that's the turning point. You realize you don't owe everyone a response. You don't need to explain every boundary. You don't need to be available at the cost of your peace. You get to choose what and who deserves your focus. And in doing so, you reclaim yourself. They may not understand it. They may call you cold, distant, detached. Let them. Their confusion is not your burden to solve. Your job is not to keep others comfortable at the expense of your own well-being. Your job is to remain aligned. And sometimes that means stepping away, not with resentment, but with grace. So ask yourself this: where is your attention being wasted? Who drains your presence but doesn't deserve your presence? And if you feel called to, share your story in the comments below. Who did you stop chasing? What changed when you reclaimed your silence? Because every time you withdraw your energy from a place it was never valued, you rise. Chapter 3: Exposing their weakness. Most people wear masks. Some of admiration, some of indifference, some of superiority. But there is one mask that cannot withstand the weight of silence. The mask of pride, because pride needs an audience. It craves acknowledgement, and when you deprive it of reaction, when you meet arrogance with calm, a strange thing happens. The mask begins to slip. This chapter is not about humiliating others. It's not about taking pleasure in someone else's unraveling. It's about clarity. It's about seeing what's really there, beneath the posturing, beneath the ego, beneath the noise. Because when you strip away attention, when you remove emotional fuel, all that's left is who they really are. And for some, that's a deeply uncomfortable truth. There's a certain kind of person who builds their identity on the responses they receive. They provoke, they belittle, they manipulate. Not because they're strong, but because it gives them a sense of control. As long as you respond, with anger, with tears, with even just a frustrated sigh, they feel powerful. But silence exposes them. When you no longer play the role they assigned you, the one who justifies, the one who reacts, the one who dances to their rhythm, you create a vacuum. And in that vacuum, their weakness becomes impossible to hide. You stop being the mirror they used to admire themselves in, and now they have to face what they've been avoiding, the hollow noise inside. Watch closely. When someone loses their composure because you no longer engage, that's not your failure, it's their exposure. When they accuse you of being distant, passive-aggressive, or cruel, they are telling on themselves. They are revealing just how dependent they were on your emotional involvement to sustain their own fragile identity. The Stoics understood that true power comes from within, from virtue, from self-discipline, from integrity, not from control over others, not from domination, and certainly not from manipulation. So when you withdraw your energy, when you become still, not to punish, but to preserve, you are creating space for truth to rise. And sometimes that truth is ugly. You may begin to see their desperation disguised as confidence, their cruelty disguised as sarcasm, their instability disguised as passion. These things become clearer when you stop reacting and start observing. And be warned, some will lash out when they feel exposed. They may accuse you of being the problem. They may fabricate narratives to protect their ego. Let them. Do not be tempted to defend what does not require defense. Your composure is your boundary. Your silence is your shield. Understand this. The strong do not need chaos to feel alive. The wise do not need approval to feel valid. And the peaceful do not need revenge to feel resolved. Silence does not expose others because it's some magical trick. It exposes them Because it removes your part in their performance. And once the curtain falls, they are left standing alone on the stage. It takes courage to stop explaining yourself. It takes maturity to refuse to chase closure. And it takes strength to sit in the discomfort of not being understood, knowing that understanding yourself is more important. So if someone begins to crack when you become quiet, don't see it as your doing. See it as their undoing. Not by force, not by malice, but by the sheer gravity of your centeredness. And if you've ever witnessed this, if someone's true character emerged only after you stepped back, I encourage you to write about it below. Not for drama, but as a reminder to others that silence isn't weakness. It's a doorway to revelation. Let the truth be revealed, not by accusation, but by stillness. Chapter 4. Staying calm amid chaos. In the tempest of life, there are voices that rise like thunder, shouting, accusing, demanding. They want you to match their volume, to flinch, to lash out, because if they can pull you into the storm, they win. If they can disrupt your calm, they gain leverage. But the one who stays steady, the one who keeps his center when everything is spinning, becomes immovable. To remain calm in the face of chaos is to possess a rare and precious form of power. But let us be clear. Calmness is not the absence of feeling. It's not numbness. It's not avoidance. It's the mastery of emotion. Not its suppression. It's the quiet voice that says, I see what's happening, I feel what's happening, and I choose my response. Most people are not reacting to reality. They are reacting to their interpretation of it. They carry assumptions, projections, old wounds, so when they shout at you, it's rarely about you. It's about the stories in their own minds, and when you respond with rage or panic, you're no longer responding to the moment. You're reacting to their illusion. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, as some misunderstand, but a clear-headed serenity, a state where one is not tossed about by every emotional wave. Imagine being in the middle of a storm, but your feet are planted deep in the earth. The winds howl, the rain pours, but you remain still. That is the strength of calm. Now let's bring this down from theory to real life. Someone close to you explodes. Maybe it's jealousy. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's pride. They throw accusations, slam doors, raise their voice. The usual instinct is to match their fire, to fight fire with fire. But what happens when you don't? When instead you pause, breathe, and speak slowly, if at all, they lose traction. The storm has nothing to hold on to. Your calm is not just silence. It is a silent no. No to the game. No to the chaos. No to the emotional manipulation. It says, I refuse to be pulled from my peace. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you sovereign. And yes, people may not like it, because your calm reveals the instability in others. It makes them question their noise. It forces them to reckon with their own reactions. They might accuse you of being distant. They might claim you don't care. But again, that is not your burden to carry. Because staying calm is not about proving anything. It's about protection of your energy, of your clarity, of your dignity. This is especially important in relationships. Romantic, familial, professional. It doesn't matter. The moment you start dancing to someone else's emotional tune, you lose control of your own tempo. But when you stay grounded, when your peace is not up for negotiation, you become someone others cannot manipulate. And that, to the uncentered, is deeply unsettling. There is also an internal version of this. Chaos is not always external. Sometimes it's the mind, the racing thoughts, the spirals of what if, the anxieties that masquerade as preparation, the arguments you have in your head with people who aren't even in the room. To stay calm amid internal chaos requires presence, breath, practice, the willingness to notice your thoughts without becoming them, to feel emotion without drowning in it, to say, yes, this is here, but it does not define me. Calm is cultivated. You train it like a muscle, through discipline, through awareness, through choosing peace even when conflict would be easier. And over time, something beautiful happens. The world still spins, the voices still shout, but you remain still. And from that stillness, you begin to hear things you never noticed before. Your intuition, your truth, your direction. So the next time someone tries to drag you into their storm, remember this: you do not owe them your turbulence. You owe yourself your peace. And if you've ever found stillness in the middle of someone else's chaos, even just once, share what that moment felt like. It may inspire someone else to hold their ground the next time the storm comes knocking. Chapter 5. Letting actions speak. In a world addicted to words, there is something sacred about restraint. When everyone is explaining, justifying, defending, correcting, the one who acts instead of speaks becomes something else entirely. A mystery, a force, a person to pay attention to. You see, anyone can say they've changed. Anyone can claim they've moved on, that they've grown, that they're unbothered. But words are fragile things. They can be bent to convenience, spoken from ego, designed to persuade rather than to express truth. That's why the Stoic does not lean on declarations. He leans on demonstration. You do not need to announce your worth. Live it. You do not need to explain your peace. Embody it. You do not need to say you are no longer chasing. Simply stop walking in their direction. Let them notice the distance in your absence, not your announcement. There is immense power in becoming unresponsive to drama. Not because you're weak, but because your life has moved on to a frequency where that noise no longer registers. You show that you've changed by no longer showing up for the same old roles. You let go of the argument not by winning it, but by stepping away from the arena altogether. This kind of behavior is not theatrical. It's not reactive. It's not "I'll show them." It's just different, clear, and it rattles the people who still live inside the economy of validation. They're still trading attention like currency, still trying to buy importance with drama. When they find your table empty, when they find your chair no longer pulled out for them, they notice, and they will often try to provoke a return. They'll say things that are bait. They'll make you the villain. They'll rewrite history. Why? Because if you're quiet, if you're calm, if you're gone, they lose the reflection they were using to make themselves feel powerful. But you must not bite. Your silence isn't just silence. It's an action. It's a decision. Let me offer you a frame. The oak tree does not argue with the wind. It simply stands. The river does not explain its path to the rocks. It just flows. There is a kind of dignity in quiet persistence that no debate can rival. Letting your actions speak doesn't mean you don't care. It means your caring is now directed inward, toward your own peace, your own growth, your own becoming. It means you have stopped asking for recognition and have started living in alignment. It means you are no longer available to negotiate your worth. And others will feel this shift. They'll sense it in your posture, in your tone, in the way you no longer linger in places that drain you, in how you now walk away not in anger but in stillness. This is what shatters pride. Not confrontation, not revenge, but the realization that you no longer need to prove anything, that you are no longer reachable on the frequency of chaos. Actions are durable. They are not erased by moods. They are not undermined by opinion. And over time, they leave a trail, not for others to admire, but for you to look back on and say, I became who I said I'd be. That's the Stoic way. Not to perform wisdom, but to live it. Not to speak of virtue, but to practice it. Not to be praised for strength, but to strengthen oneself quietly, every day. So, let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them misinterpret your silence. You keep building. You keep walking. You keep showing, without showing off. And if you've reached that point in your life where you're done explaining and now you're just doing, I'd love to hear how that feels. Share it in the comments. It may encourage someone still trying to be heard by those who refuse to listen. Let your presence be proof. Let your stillness be your stance. Let your life speak and say everything that words could never capture. Chapter 6, Building Inner Peace. There is a kind of strength that doesn't glitter. It doesn't shout. It doesn't walk into the room asking to be admired. It's quiet, settled, like a deep lake, undisturbed even when the wind stirs the surface. That is inner peace. And it is not given, it is built. We live in a culture that glorifies external achievement. How much you make, how admired you are, how many people want you. But rarely do we ask, how peaceful are you when you're alone? Can you sit with your own thoughts and not flinch? Can you be still and feel whole? Most cannot. The noise of the world becomes a drug. Distraction, stimulation, anything to avoid meeting oneself fully. But the Stoic, the one who seeks mastery, not applause, turns inward. Not as an escape, but as a return. He seeks calm. Not because the world is calm, but because he refuses to be ruled by its storms. Building inner peace is not a weekend retreat. It is not a quote on your wall. It is not a moment of calm after a meditation session. It is a daily practice. A construction project that never truly ends. You lay the bricks with discipline. You seal them with awareness. You protect them with boundaries. It begins by watching the mind. Most of our suffering does not come from events themselves, but from our interpretation of them. A late reply becomes rejection. A missed opportunity becomes failure. A cold glance becomes betrayal. But these are stories we write on the blackboard of our minds. To build peace, you must learn to erase, to question, to pause between stimulus and response. That space, that sacred gap, is where freedom lives. The freedom to choose a response, to decide, this thought is not helpful. To breathe instead of spiral. To speak with intention or not speak at all. Peace is also physical. It lives in the body. A clenched jaw is a message. A racing heart is a flag. Most people ignore these signals. They drown them in noise, caffeine, scrolling, lashing out. But you begin to listen. You walk, you stretch, you breathe deep. You move the energy instead of letting it rot. It's also relational. You cannot build peace in a war zone. Some people carry conflict like a perfume. They cannot rest unless they've stirred something. You'll know them by how your energy feels after they leave. If you are lighter, they are peace. If you are heavier, they are noise. act accordingly. Sometimes, you'll have to create distance, not to punish, but to protect the sanctuary you're building. Inner peace cannot thrive in environments that constantly demand your reactivity. And yes, people will accuse you of being cold. Let them. You are not a heater for their insecurity. Peace also requires forgiveness. Not because others deserve it, but because you do. Holding resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other to suffer. You begin to forgive, not just them, but yourself, for what you tolerated, for what you didn't know, for what you mishandled when you were still learning. You also begin to create. A peaceful life is not just absence of conflict, it is presence of joy. You find rituals that nourish you: sunlight, silence, a long walk without a phone, music that calms the chest, books that sharpen the mind, conversations that don't drain but uplift. You make room for these like sacred appointments. And here's the twist. Once you start building inner peace, you will become intolerant of anything that disturbs it. You'll stop chasing drama. You'll stop needing validation. You'll stop over-explaining. Your soul will begin to crave stillness, the way a tired body craves sleep. That's when you know you're changing. You no longer seek peace from others. You bring it. You don't need their apology. You have your clarity. You don't need the last word. You have your freedom. You don't need to prove your worth. You feel it in your breath. So ask yourself now, what would your life look like if your inner world was no longer at war? Who would you be if you were truly at peace? And if you're in the process of building that, brick by brick, share your ritual. Share the things that bring you back to stillness. Your story may help another quiet their storm, because peace is not a luxury. It is your foundation. And once it's built, they can throw what they want, but nothing moves you. Chapter 7, Their Ego Unravels. It begins with confusion, a twitch of the eyebrow, a delayed text, a sudden shift in tone. They don't say it out loud, but you can feel it. Something's changed, something's missing. And it's not you, it's their power over you. You no longer respond the way you used to. No more immediate replies. No more justifications. No more walking on emotional eggshells just to keep the peace. You're still here, but you're not available in the same way. And slowly, their ego begins to unravel. Because for people who depend on being above others to feel valuable, your calm is unsettling. Your peace is not only foreign, it's offensive. It refuses to cooperate. It doesn't rise to the bait. And so their performance begins to falter. You see, when someone's identity is built on superiority, on being admired, feared, chased, or needed, they need constant evidence that they still matter, that they're still in control. And if they've grown used to your attention, your praise, your chasing the moment you withdraw it, they don't feel neglected. They feel exposed. Exposed to their own emptiness, their own insecurity, their lack of substance once the applause stops. This is where their ego starts to decay, not from your words, but from the echo that your absence leaves behind. Let's pause for a moment and be clear. This is not about domination. This is not about playing games or taking secret satisfaction in someone else's fall. The Stoic does not seek revenge. He does not celebrate the unraveling of another's pride as a conquest, but he watches it silently, as the inevitable consequence of false power meeting true composure. This unraveling often comes in stages. At first they question, is something wrong? Did I do something? Why are you so distant? Then comes provocation. Oh, I guess you're too good now. You used to care more. You've changed. And finally, the unraveling, anger, blame, projection. They lash out not because of what you did, but because of what you refused to do. Play your old part, the one that propped up their ego, the one that handed them power disguised as connection. You're not who you used to be. And that threatens the very architecture of their self-image. There is a peculiar fragility to those who wear their confidence like armor. They appear strong, composed, self-assured, but strip away the audience, take away the admiration, and you'll find panic beneath the surface. Not because they lack value, but because they never built it from within. And when your silence becomes consistent, when your boundaries hold, when you no longer feed the narrative where they're the center, they are forced to look inward. Most won't, but a few will, and in that uncomfortable gaze, they might begin to change. Or they might collapse further into denial. Either way, that's not yours to manage. Your work is not to fix their pride, nor to shrink so they feel tall again. Your work is to remain whole, untouched by flattery, unshaken by insult. You are no longer a mirror. You are a presence, and presence does not bend for approval. What truly unravels the ego is not cruelty. It is irrelevance. When you no longer respond, when you no longer explain, when you no longer orbit around them, they realize they never truly had you. They had your attention, your time, your insecurity, perhaps, but not your essence. That they never reached, and that realization cuts deeper than any insult. So the unraveling continues, sometimes slowly, sometimes explosively, but always in proportion to how dependent they were on your validation. And as they unravel, you, not in spite, not in revenge, but in quiet evolution. If you've ever seen this unfold, if someone's power seemed to dissolve the moment you stood still, reflect on what that moment taught you. Share it in the comments below. You never know who needs the courage to do the same. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step out of the way and let their ego meet itself. Chapter 8. Mastering Self-Control. There are many kinds of power in this world. The power to persuade, the power to dominate, the power to create, to destroy, to build, to move. But there is one form of power that governs all others, one that sits quietly at the center of everything a Stoic aspires to be: self-control. To master yourself is to master life. It sounds simple. It is not, because the real battlefield is not out there. It is inside. The war is waged in the quiet decisions, in the small moments when no one is watching, in the space between feeling and acting, in the microsecond where emotion rises and reason has a chance to step forward. Most people never fight that battle. They are led by their impulses. They are pulled by desire, by anger, by fear. Someone insults them, they lash out. Someone ignores them, they spiral. Someone ignores them, they spiral. Someone loves them, they cling. It's not because they're bad. It's because they are ruled. But not you, not anymore. Self-control is not the suppression of feeling. It is the redirection of energy. It's being able to feel the fire without throwing it, to feel the ache without drowning in it, to feel the pull and still choose your path. There is dignity in restraint. There is strength in the man who wants to speak and doesn't, who wants to chase and sits still, who wants to strike back and walks away. Not because he's afraid, not because he's cold, but because he knows who he is. And that knowledge gives him choices. Control over others is fleeting. Control over self is eternal. Imagine the kind of clarity that comes when you are no longer a slave to reaction. When your day is not dictated by whether someone smiled at you or not. When your peace is not held hostage by someone else's behavior. When your value does not inflate or deflate based on external feedback. This is freedom. And yet, it is not easy. Mastery demands repetition, discipline, honesty. You must confront your patterns. The ones that say, if they don't text me back, I'm unlovable. The ones that say, if they disrespect me, I have to prove my strength. These beliefs, inherited, conditioned, absorbed, are weights, and you must train to put them down. The Stoics trained every day. They rehearsed adversity. They imagined loss. They practiced detachment, not to become emotionless, but to be prepared, to face life without flinching, to greet suffering with grace, to remain sovereign even when the world demanded surrender. Self-control is not glamorous. It often looks like saying nothing, like walking away, like taking the long road. But it builds something unshakable in you, something that cannot be taken away. And when you have that, you become rare. You stop chasing people to complete you. You stop needing revenge to heal you. You stop responding to every emotional poke. You walk slower. You speak softer. You choose differently. And yes, some will not understand. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're hard to read. And that's fine. You're no longer here to be read. You're here to be rooted. Self-control gives you space. It gives you dignity. It gives you back your time, your energy, your attention. And it gives others a mirror to see their own lack of discipline, which is why some resent it, because your calm reveals their chaos. Your restraint exposes their impulsiveness, so you continue, quietly, consistently. And in doing so, you shift from reacting to creating, from surviving to sculpting. You become the architect of your responses, the author of your own rhythm. And that is the most dangerous kind of power, because it cannot be stolen. If you've tasted that freedom, even once, where you acted with discipline when everything screamed for a reaction, I invite you to share what that felt like. There is strength in your story. Let it be a compass for others who are still learning to hold the line within. Because once you master yourself, nothing outside of you can master you again. Chapter 9. Becoming untouchable. What does it mean to become untouchable? Not immune to life, not cold or numb, not a fortress of bitterness or isolation. No, the untouchable are not those who feel nothing. They are the ones who feel deeply, think clearly, and yet remain unmoved by attempts to pull them off center. Becoming untouchable is not about armor, it's about essence. A calm so deeply rooted, a sense of self so solid, that no insult, no absence, no manipulation, no emotional storm can reach you unless you open the door. It is the final form of Stoic strength, not the clenched fist, not the raised voice, not the dramatic exit. It is the steady eye, the subtle smile, the decision not to respond, the choice to keep walking forward. The world, you will notice, doesn't know how to handle someone who no longer needs validation. People become confused when you don't rise to the bait, when you're not easily provoked, when you don't seek approval, Don't beg for attention. Don't explain your peace. Because most of society is still addicted to reaction. It runs on cycles of insecurity and ego, emotional highs and performative breakdowns. But the moment you step out of that rhythm, the moment you no longer dance on the strings of someone else's pride, you become unfamiliar. And to the prideful, the insecure, the manipulative, the unfamiliar is frightening. You become the thing they can't predict, can't manipulate, can't define. Your silence is no longer a pause. It's a statement. Your gaze is no longer a plea. It's observation. Your presence is no longer waiting for permission. It simply is. And when you reach this place, you realize something else. There's nothing left to prove. You don't need to correct every misrepresentation. You don't need to seek justice in every injustice. You don't need to be seen or heard or praised. You've replaced external approval with internal stability. You've swapped out noise for clarity. You've found your ground, and you're not stepping off it for anyone. This doesn't mean you become arrogant. Quite the opposite. The truly untouchable are the most humble, because they don't operate from ego. They don't need to dominate. They don't need to impress. They don't need to win, because their value is not up for debate. Their peace is not a performance. It's a state of being. So how do you get there? By doing everything we've explored. Until now, you stay silent when noise demands your reaction. You withdraw your energy where it's wasted. You expose ego not by confrontation but by detachment. You remain calm when chaos knocks. You act instead of explaining. You build peace, brick by brick. You master the war within. And finally, you arrive. You become the kind of person whose presence alone changes the temperature in the room. And people feel it, even if they can't name it. It's in the way you don't chase. The way you pause before responding. The way you walk away, not in anger, but in grace. The way you no longer need closure to close the chapter. The way your attention has become sacred, limited, earned. You are no longer easily accessed, not because you're hiding, but because you've realized how expensive your peace is. When you become untouchable, people will test you. They'll poke. They'll try to break through the silence. They'll throw old versions of yourself at your feet to see if you'll pick them up. But you've outgrown the need to react. And that frustrates them more than any comeback ever could. There will be moments of temptation. Moments where the old you wants to speak, to explain, to fight, to prove. That's natural. But now you recognize those impulses for what they are. Remnants of a self that once needed to be seen to feel real. Now, your reality is not contingent on being understood. That is true power. That is freedom. That is what it means to be untouchable. And if you're on this path, if you feel yourself becoming less reactive, more discerning, less emotionally available to chaos, tell me, what changed in your life when you stopped being so accessible? What doors closed and which ones finally opened? Because becoming untouchable isn't about building walls, it's about building standards. And when you live by those, everything that cannot meet them quietly fades away. Conclusion. There's a moment in every transformation where you look back and realize you didn't lose anything important. You just stopped holding on to things that never truly held you. The noise, the conflict, the constant proving. It falls away. And in its place, a silence remains. A silence that is not empty, but full of clarity, full of intention, full of strength. That is the quiet that shatters their pride. Not because it is cruel, not because it is calculated, but because it reveals. It shows the truth of your growth, the depth of your peace, the sharp edges of their ego, dulled not by confrontation but by your refusal to feed it. This is what it means to become someone who cannot be moved by manipulation, nor seduced by validation, nor broken by absence. Someone who does not flinch at silence, but owns it, speaks through it, commands through it. You don't chase. You don't explain. You simply walk forward, grounded, clear, calm. If this message resonated with you, if you felt yourself stepping into that power, don't let it fade. Revisit it. Protect it. Let it deepen. And if this video gave you clarity, or comfort, or confirmation, consider subscribing. Like the video. Share it with someone who might be trapped in a cycle they're ready to leave. The path is quiet, but we don't walk it alone. And in the comments, I wanted to hear from you. What is your experience with silence as strength? What changed when you stopped playing by their rules? How did your peace begin to speak for itself? Let your story speak, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power.